The snow came early that year, clean and quiet, laying a white lie over the dirt of Red Willow Crossing. Christmas! Eve should have brought hymns and stew pots and laughter leaking from saloon doors, but instead the town gathered like crows around the stock pens. Lanterns burned yellow against the dusk. Breath smoked the air. Somewhere a fiddle tried to remember a joyful tune and failed. They stood on a crate between the sheep rails. Two girls with the same narrow face and the same black hair cut straight at the jaw. Identical, down to the small crescent scar beneath the left eye of each. Mirror-born marks from a childhood fall. Their hands were tied together with hemp, wrists rubbed raw, fingers numb with cold. The sign nailed to the crate read in chalk, "Pear, strong speak. Little. Cheap for the holiday." Someone laughed. Someone spat. Someone asked if they came as a set or could be split like a yoke of oxen. They did not cry. That was the first shocking thing. They watched with eyes as dark as the winter river, unblinking, absorbing every face, every twitch of a hand near a gun butt. The older men stared like they were appraising mules. The younger ones leaned in with stupid curiosity. The preacher's wife stood at the edge with a shawl pulled tight, lips moving in a prayer that could not cross the distance. A man with a ledger barked the opening price. "Christmas bargain," he said. 2 for 1. Cook, clean, work. Don't make trouble. A booted foot shoved the crate to test its balance. The twins swayed together, shoulders brushing, a single creature breathing in two chests. One of them whispered something in a language no one else understood. The other nodded once. They had been carried west in the bellies of ships and wagons, sold and resold, names shaved down to sounds that fit English mouths. May and Lynn they were called now, though the names did not belong to them. Their real names were stitched into memory, not spoken. They had learned that words could be knives when they were overheard. The auctioneer raised his hand. "Who'll start?" A rancher with frost in his beard lifted 2 fingers. A miner countered. A storekeeper laughed and upped it. Coins clinked. The lantern light flickered like a bad thought. The twins felt the rope bite tighter as the bidding climbed. Lynn's heart hammered. May's jaw set. Christmas bells rang from the church across the square, thin and distant as if ashamed to be heard. Then the square went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with reverence. A horse came in from the north road, slow as if it knew the value of arriving late. Snow hissed under iron shoes. The rider did not hurry. He wore a long coat the color of old blood and a hat pulled low. The gun at his hip was not showy. The horse was lean and scarred, a veteran. Someone muttered a name. Someone else swallowed. The gunslinger dismounted and tied his reins with care. He took off his gloves and blew into his hands, then rubbed them together. Like a man about to pray, his eyes lifted to the crate. "How much for them?" he asked, voice quiet, flat as the land. The auctioneer bristled. "Bidding's open." "You can—" I asked how much, the gunslinger said. The ledger man glanced at the gun, then at the crowd, then back at the girls. "They're a pair. You don't split pairs, not tonight." The gunslinger stepped closer. He smelled of leather and smoke and long roads. May met his eyes and felt something like a door opening. Lynn squeezed her fingers once. "I don't split," the gunslinger said. "I take what I take." A rancher scoffed. "They don't talk much English. Won't be much use." "That's fine," the gunslinger said. "I talk enough for 3 men." Laughter broke the tension, brittle. The auctioneer called a number. The gunslinger did not blink. He nodded once. The price jumped. The gunslinger nodded again. The miner swore. The storekeeper shook his head and backed out. The rancher hesitated, pride wrestling with sense, then spat and dropped his hand. "Sold," the auctioneer said, relief flooding his face. He reached for the rope. "No," the gunslinger said softly. "You'll untie them." The auctioneer froze. "Sir!" The gunslinger's hand rested near his holster. Not touching, just reminding the world it was there. Now. The rope fell away. May and Lynn flexed numb fingers. The crowd murmured, disappointed in a way that had nothing to do with money. The gunslinger shrugged out of his coat and draped it around the twins' shoulders. "You're coming with me," he said, and then, as if remembering something important, he added, "I'll take you home." Home was a word that hurt. It had edges. May swallowed. Lynn bowed her head, the smallest motion, but it was enough. They walked out of Red Willow Crossing under a sky that had decided to snow harder, bells fading behind them. No one stopped them. No one wanted to test whether the man meant what he said. They rode north, the twins on a blanket between saddle and cantle, hands tucked into the gunslinger's coat. The road was a white ribbon. Wolves howled far off, polite enough to keep their distance. They did not speak, until the town was gone and the world belonged only to the sound of the hoarse and the whisper of falling snow. "My name is Ezra Cole," the gunslinger said then, as if offering a gift. "You don't have to answer. Not tonight." May thought of the sign with chalk letters. She thought of the crate. She thought of Christmas bells that rang for everyone but her. "May," she said. "This is Lynn." Ezra nodded. "Good." They reached his cabin at dawn. A low thing tucked into pines, smoke already rising from the chimney. Inside it was warm. There was stew on the stove and bread wrapped in cloth. Ezra set out bowls and stepped back, giving space like a man used to living with ghosts. They ate like people who did not trust the future to feed them again. Ezra pretended not to watch. That night when the wind tried to pry the roof loose, Lynn woke screaming. Ezra was there before the echo died, kneeling by the bed, hands open, empty. He did not touch her until she reached for him. He sat on the floor until morning, back against the wall, humming a tune with no words. Days came, snow piled. Ezra showed them where the water froze slowest, how to split wood along the grain, how to read the sky. May taught him how to patch cloth so the tear did not spread. Lynn showed him how to make dumplings from what little flour they had. They learned each other without hurry. But the past is a thing that rides fast when it smells blood. The men who had lost their bid followed tracks north 2 days after Christmas. They told themselves stories about stolen property and insulted pride. They told themselves the gunslinger was old, alone, winter soft. They did not tell themselves the truth about what they were. Ezra saw them from the ridge, black dots against white. He felt the old cold settle into his bones, the one that had nothing to do with weather. He sent May and Lynn to the root cellar with a lantern and the shotgun. "If you hear the bell," he said, "you don't come out." "What bell?" Lynn asked. Ezra smiled without humor. "You'll know." The men came at dusk. They shouted. They demanded. Ezra answered with silence until words ran out. The first shot cracked the air. Snow leapt. Ezra moved like a man who had practiced moving when death was a metronome. He did not miss. He did not linger. The bell rang when the third man fell. The sound carried on the wind from the church bell. Ezra had hauled years ago and hung between 2 pines, a warning and a prayer. When it was over, Ezra stood breathing hard, hands shaking. The old price paid again. He buried the dead because winter does not care who deserves it. In the cellar, May held the shotgun steady, finger straight, Lynn's hand on her wrist. They listened to the bell and counted breaths until the world settled. Spring came late. So did the law. Ezra told his story. The sheriff listened and nodded, and did what sheriffs do when the truth fits the shape of their town. Papers were signed. Names were written carefully. On the first warm day, Ezra took a board and painted it slow and neat. He nailed it by the road, Cole Ranch. Below it, smaller, in characters learned by lantern light, May painted 2 names side by side. Travelers stopped sometimes. They bought eggs. They traded news. They learned not to ask foolish questions. Years later, when the twins laughed in the sun and the sound carried, like bells across the pasture, people would say the West was a hard place that took more than it gave. Ezra would sit on the porch and clean his gun and think of a Christmas Eve when the snow told the truth and a pair of girls did not cry. He would think of the moment he said the words that mattered, and how the world, for once, listened.